Can I eat your leftovers? The late afternoon sun spilled gold across the cliffside terrace of La Terraza del Mare, a restaurant perched above the turquoise waters of the Amalfi Coast. Waiters in crisp white shirts moved between tables draped in linen, the smell of grilled seafood and fresh bread drifting on the sea breeze. Bougainville climbed the wooden pergolas overhead, and somewhere below, fishing boats bobbed lazily against the harbor. At a table near the edge, Eleanor Whitfield sat alone, a plate of shrimp and mussels arranged neatly before her. She was 62, silver-haired, dressed in a black silk blouse that had probably cost more than most people's monthly rent. Her rings caught the light every time she lifted her fork. She was the founder and CEO of Whitfield Textiles, a company with factories in 4 countries and a personal fortune that made headlines every time Forbes published its list. She had come to Positano to escape, if only for a week, the endless calls and meetings and decisions that came with running an empire. But even here she ate alone, scrolling through emails on her phone between bites, barely tasting the food she'd ordered. It was then that she noticed the girl. She came down the cobblestone path haltingly, as though her legs weren't sure they wanted to carry her forward. Her jeans were torn, not fashionably, but from actual wear, actual falling, actual scraping against actual pavement. Her blue shirt hung loose on a frame that looked like it hadn't had a proper meal in days. Dark hair escaped in messy strands around a face streaked with dirt, and slung over her shoulder was a large black garbage bag that seemed to hold everything she owned in the world. She stopped a few feet from the edge of the terrace, eyes flickering toward the tables, toward the food, toward the wine glasses sweating in the warm air. A waiter noticed her and began walking over, his pace quick, his expression already forming into the practiced politeness restaurants use to remove problems without causing scenes. Eleanor watched the exchange from her table. She couldn't hear the words, but she didn't need to. She had seen this exact interaction play out 100 times in 100 cities. A person with nothing, gently steered away from a place with everything. But something made her stand up. "Wait," Eleanor called out, her voice cutting through the clinking of glasses and murmured conversations. The waiter paused mid-step. The girl froze too, as if bracing for a different kind of rejection. Eleanor walked toward her, ignoring the stares from nearby tables. Up close, the girl looked younger than Eleanor had first thought, maybe 19, 20 at most. Her eyes were a striking hazel, but rimmed with the kind of exhaustion that comes from days without real sleep. "I'm sorry," the girl said quietly, her voice hoarse, an accent that suggested English wasn't her first language but was still fluent enough. "I didn't mean to bother anyone. I saw the food, and I haven't eaten since yesterday morning, and I thought maybe, if there were leftovers, I could." She stopped herself, embarrassed, looking down at her worn shoes. "Can I eat your leftovers?" she finally asked, so softly it was almost swallowed by the breeze. The waiter shifted uncomfortably, clearly ready to intervene, to apologize to Eleanor for the disturbance, to escort the girl away with practiced firmness. But Eleanor raised a hand, silencing him without a word. "What's your name?" Eleanor asked. The girl blinked, startled by the question. "Sophia," she said after a moment. "Sophia," Eleanor repeated. "I'm Eleanor. Sit down." No, I couldn't. I just wanted the leftovers. I don't want to." "Sophia," Eleanor's tone was gentle but firm, the same tone she used in boardrooms when she needed something settled. "You will not eat my leftovers. You will sit down, and you will order your own meal. Whatever you like." Sophia's eyes welled up almost instantly, and she pressed a dirty hand against her mouth as if to hold back a sound. The waiter, sensing the shift, quietly pulled out a chair. "I can't pay for this," Sophia whispered as she lowered herself into the seat, the garbage bag settling beside her feet like a loyal, tattered dog. "I didn't ask you to." Eleanor sat back down across from her and gestured for the waiter, who returned moments later with a menu. Sophia stared at it as though it were written in a language she couldn't quite process, her hands trembling slightly. "Get whatever you want," Eleanor said. "The seafood risotto here is excellent. So is the grilled branzino." I don't know what those are." "That's all right, trust me." Eleanor ordered for her the branzino, a plate of pasta, fresh bread, a glass of water, and after a pause, a small glass of orange juice. When the waiter left, silence settled between the two women. heavy with everything neither of them was saying yet. "How long have you been on the street?" Eleanor finally asked. Sophia's fingers picked at the frayed hem of her shirt. 6 months, maybe 7, but we stopped counting. What happened? For a moment, Sophia looked like she might not answer. Then, slowly, the words came. My mother died. Cancer. We didn't have insurance. We're from Albania. We came here for work. But nothing came easy. After she passed, I couldn't keep the apartment. I tried to find work, but no papers, no address, no phone. It's hard to get someone to hire you when you look like this. She gestured vaguely at herself. I tried shelters, but they were full or too far, or they wanted documents I don't have. Eleanor listened without interrupting, without the pity that Sophia had clearly learned to expect and dread. She simply listened, the way she rarely had time to listen to anyone anymore. Not her board members, not her own children, who called twice a year if she was lucky. What did you do before all this? Eleanor asked. I was studying, Sophia said, something flickering behind her tired eyes. Design. Fashion design. I wanted to make clothes, like real clothes, beautiful ones. I used to sketch for hours. I still have some of my drawings. She gestured to the garbage bag. In there. I couldn't leave them behind. Eleanor went very still. Show me, she said. Sophia hesitated, then reached into the bag and pulled out a worn folder, its edges soft from handling, rain-stained in places. Inside were dozens of sketches, dresses, coats, intricate patterns done in pencil and colored ink, each one detailed with fabric notes and stitching techniques in careful, cramped handwriting. Eleanor's hands, the same hands that had signed contracts worth millions, that had shaken hands with prime ministers and shut down factories without blinking, now moved carefully, reverently, through the pages. They were good, not just good, genuinely, remarkably good. The kind of raw talent that design schools spent years trying to cultivate in students who had every advantage Sophia never had. Sophia, Eleanor said quietly, do you know who I am? Sophia shook her head. I own Whitfield Textiles. We supply fabric and manufacturing to some of the biggest fashion houses in Europe. Eleanor closed the folder gently and slid it back toward Sophia. I've reviewed thousands of portfolios from design school graduates. Most of them aren't half as good as this. Sophia stared at her, uncomprehending, as though the words didn't fit into any version of reality she'd allowed herself to imagine in months. I'm not asking for charity, Eleanor continued. I'm offering you a job, an apprenticeship, to start with our design team in Milan, housing included, while you get back on your feet. If your work is even half as good in practice as it is on paper, you won't need charity for very long. Sophia's mouth opened, but no sound came out. Tears spilled freely down her cheeks now, cutting clean lines through the dirt and dust of the road. Why? She finally managed. Why would you do this for someone you just met? Someone who looks like... She gestured at herself, at the rags, at the bag. This? Eleanor was quiet for a long moment, looking out at the sea, at the fishing boats catching the last of the golden light. Because 35 years ago, she said slowly, I was sitting in a train station in Manchester with nothing but a suitcase and 40 pounds to my name. I had left an abusive marriage with nothing else. A stranger bought me a meal that night and told me my resume was impressive enough to interview for a job I didn't think I had a chance at. She looked back at Sophia. That job was the first rung of the ladder that became everything I have now. I've spent 35 years being too busy to pay that forward. I think I've been busy long enough. The waiter arrived then with the food, golden branzino, fragrant pasta, warm bread, and set it down before Sophia with a newfound gentleness in his movements, as if he too understood something had shifted. Sophia looked down at the plate, then up at Eleanor, and for the first time that evening she smiled, a small, uncertain, disbelieving smile, but a real one. Eat, Eleanor said. We'll talk about Milan after. As Sophia lifted her fork with trembling hands, Eleanor allowed herself, for the first time in years, to simply watch someone enjoy a meal. No phone, no emails, no boardroom waiting. Just the sea, the fading light, and the quiet, unshakable feeling that she had finally done something that mattered. 3 months later, a young designer named Sofia Huxa would present her first collection in a small showcase in Milan. A line inspired, she told the small audience, by the kindness of strangers and the courage it takes to ask for help. Eleanor sat in the front row, And when Sophia found her eyes across the room, neither of them needed to say a word. Some leftovers, it turned out, were never really about the food at all.